Thank you for getting up early enough to show up to the first talk. I know I don't always make it to that at a conference, so I'm glad that you guys did. My name, like Troy said, is Rathan. I'm a web developer at Mozilla. I'm primarily a Python developer, so I'm sorry. And I'm a beardo, like a couple others in the room. So today I'm going to talk about PubSub and how it can make your life quite a bit better. PubSub is generally used for building distributed services, whether it's widely distributed across the internet or locally distributed across a bunch of nodes in your data center, or very locally distributed across a whole bunch of virtual machines on the same box or processes in the same system. I'm going to use my IRC-bot, ZenIRCBot, as a case study for this. It's a nice trivial example that most people can understand. Because most of us have been on IRC. If you haven't been on IRC, you've probably been in like a chat room of some sort. I know when I was a kid, AOL chat rooms were cool. I don't know what people use these days for chat rooms other than IRC. I wrote it about a year ago. It's evolved in some ways and stayed very the same in others. So let's move on. PubSub. It's more than just a buzzword. First, when I saw it showing up, there's a few people. I remember Max working with it a bit, but it wasn't widely used. It seemed like just kind of like buzzwordy, like, oh, it's just some messages passed across some bus. I've seen this implemented in many, many different ways. It didn't make any sense to make a big deal about PubSub. The thing about PubSub, though, is that it vastly simplifies this idea of sending, like, if you're familiar with network stacks, it simplifies the idea of using UDP setups and even TCP, depending on which flavor of PubSub you're using. You can connect to a socket, you push data at it, and then the other side gets it or doesn't get it, and both sides are able to stay up, even though the other one may or may not be up. This allowing of one side to fall without the other side falling is one of the biggest things about PubSub. You can connect. Sorry, I just said that part. One of the biggest things about PubSub, you could build out your infrastructure, and key parts of infrastructure will not bring down other key parts of infrastructure, or optional parts of infrastructure, like your logging and whatnot, won't bring down your website. Because if your logging server goes down, your website should keep running, because generally your logging is not required for your website to run. It's just there as a nicety. So, yeah. The flavor I'll be talking about today is Redis PubSub. The speaker after me, I think, is talking about ZeroMQ. And so there'll be the two primary ways people use PubSub. So Redis PubSub is mostly guaranteed delivery. A publisher just publishes on a PubSub channel. It connects to Redis, and then it publishes to a channel, and the messages go out to 0 or more subscribers, depending on how many subscribers there are. On the subscriber side, you connect to this PubSub, or you connect to Redis, you subscribe to the PubSub channel, and all messages sent to that channel from the time you subscribe until you disconnect, you get. Now, this means that if you can't process them fast enough, Redis queues them up for you so you can grab them later. It's a really nice part of using the Redis setup. I know ZeroMQ has a stack that works this way. They also have, I think they have 15 flavors of PubSub in their library. What this means is that you can just make, I lost my track. What this means is you can, from the publisher side, you just publish messages, and on the subscriber side, you can listen for them. And when a message comes across, you can process it however you need to. This is where it goes really well with evented patterns, and Node.js works really well with this. You have you have a nice event emitter. That's how the subscribe part of most Redis libraries are written. You listen for an event, like message or something like that. It gives you the data inside of it, and you process it. Now, you could build other layers on top of that where you can take those messages and determine what type they are and build another event emitter that then processes them more eloquently for you. This is why I got into Node.js, and this is how I got into PubSub. Is I was building an IRC bot. I wanted something more interesting, and so I went with playing with the new setup because I'd never really played with Node.js, and JavaScript was this thing where I used to work with the DOM, and I pretty much hated it. And PubSub was this weird buzzwordy thing, but I heard it could be good for this case where you could where you just pass messages across processes. So, what is ZenIRCBot? It's a thin layer between IRC and Redis. All it does is when a message comes in on an IRC channel, it turns that into a nice little JSON blob and sends it to Redis. And other types of messages, not just like people talking in channels, but people joining channels, leaving channels, certain CTCPs, a bunch of different IRC events. Whenever they're sent to ZenIRCBot because it's connected, it just forwards them over to Redis. It's also a protocol using PubSub as a transport. All the services that ZenIRCBot uses, because ZenIRCBot is built as multiple processes. It has a process that is sitting the thin layer between IRC and Redis, and then it has other processes that are listening to the channels that that ZenIRCBot is publishing to. Now, the really cool part about this bot isn't that it's this nice layer between IRC and Redis. Anyone can build that, and it's not a big deal. The idea that you have a protocol for communicating with Redis using PubSub, that's where this starts to shine. It gives you a nice, simple way of not having to deal with connecting to Redis, not having to deal with processing this text protocol that is, I think, literally as old as I am. It frees you up to just send JSON blobs back and forth. This is really easy to deal with. That's what we, as web developers, building REST APIs and all that stuff, are really, really used to. So that's what I built, and it worked out. Also, sometimes it's just an IRC bot. I mean, it says stuff in the channels. The bot itself actually can reply to one thing, I think. But for the most part, it's a relay and a protocol. So let's look at the protocol. You have an incoming message. For me, so I built this out with the JSON, using JSON objects. I have a versioned API, or a versioned protocol, because that's moderately important when you want to upgrade something and you either want to deprecate or add more required fields. I have a type, priv message, which is, it's exposing a little bit of the underlying IRC, because that's what they call a message to a channel or a message to an individual is called a priv message or private message. And then inside of that, I have this data blob. So that outside, the version, type, and data, that's just an envelope. Every single event that comes out has that same envelope, so I can process it and make sure it gets sent to the right place. Inside of the data area, we have the sender, someone, the channel, node PDX, and what someone said to that channel. Having a well-defined protocol like this means that anything that comes from IRC lets me process it in a service, and then the other side of this is ZenIRCBot listens on a single PubSub channel. Now, this PubSub channel that listens on has the same sort of protocol. It has an envelope, which is a version, a message, and then the data that goes in, a version, a type, and the data that goes inside. Now, this one is an outgoing message. This would send from a service to ZenIRCBot over PubSub. And really, it's not sent from ZenIRCBot or from the service to ZenIRCBot, but just sent into the PubSub channel, and ZenIRCBot happens to be listening on that. Anything could be listening on that. You could have logging services on either side, just picking up all the messages and dumping them somewhere. Anyway, in this case, this is how ZenIRCBot, literally, this is what ZenIRCBot would say, because it was you're telling it to send a priv message to node PDX, and then what the message content is. Really, what I'm trying to drive home, though, is that is that protocols are more than just an implementation detail. We're very used to just going with, we don't think about a lot of the protocols we use, HTTP and other things like that. And we don't think about our internal APIs as protocols, because it's just a function with a signature. It's a class. It's a thing that you just instantiate and use or call or whatever. It's not, you don't think of it as a protocol. But in this case, when you're calling from from one process to another process, you really have to define this protocol. And this is where PubSub is. If you don't define this protocol, you don't try and create something a little bit more generic on the outside and more specific on the inside, you end up making PubSub way more difficult for yourself to use. The idea of using an envelope and then saying a type and then being more specific on the inside is not genuine to me, right? It's something we've been doing for a really long time. Unfortunately, the only example that comes to mind right now is soap, but there are a lot of other things that do this too. So one of the reasons why ZenIRCBot has become a little bit successful, I have a decent number of users and multiple companies using it, and is that I actually have a lot of documentation, and the documentation gets the protocol in great detail, and then also covers a little bit of how to use it and why it was built that way and how to set up the bot itself. But those are just, I think of those as implementation details. Like the protocol is a really cool part. So let's look at how we'd send a message. This publish out. Yeah. So let's go how to send a message. We have Redis. I have my ZenIRCBot that object, which I have the send message thing on. It takes to and message. It has a Redis connection already on it because it's during instantiation of ZenIRCBot, it does that. And it just sends to this channel called out. It stringifies a JSON blob, which it deals with all the envelope for you, and the destination, which is to destination. That code doesn't work. Sorry, I changed this code a little bit ago for the example to make it shorter, and I lost a little bit of stuff that doesn't actually run. Anyway, example of using that though. You have a Redis connection. You subscribe to it. In this one, we're subscribing to the channel in. This is where ZenIRCBot dumps everything that comes in from IRC to in. And so on message coming in, it parses that JSON blob. It checks the envelope to make sure that it is version 1 and of the type that it's expecting. And then it does a regex on the message to see, is this message actually the thing I'm looking for? And if it is, then it sends a message. It sends something back using that function I showed in the last slide. It's really, really simple. Now, it's not quite as simple as directly using an IRC library and dumping messages through that. You're adding some extra complexity. So why would you do this? Now, for us, for me, part of the reason I wrote this was I had servers doing deploys, and I needed to send messages to IRC doing that. I had various things that were all that I wanted notifications in IRC, and I wanted it so that if the IRC bot went down, I don't have to wait for like a 1 minute timeout or even a tenth of a second timeout. That's silly. What it should do is just fire off a message, and if anything's listening, it'll dump it to a channel. What this means is that I can have multiple bots all listening to the same PubSub channel, and so when this message comes through, they can all process it. It means that I can do development on a bot as well as having a production one using the same source of data and not contaminating it at all. It simplifies things to a great extent. What else did I say? So this idea is not just like exclusive to IRC bots. Like I talked about earlier with logging. Mozilla recently built a thing called Heka, which is named after, I think, a 1,000-armed giant. It's a logging setup. It uses 0MQ. Your servers all push messages at the ZeroMQ at this thing that's listening on a ZeroMQ, or subscribe to a ZeroMQ channel. It pushes things at it. It logs all of them. It logs them in wherever they came from and all the message types and all that stuff. And it works really well. And if it goes down, it doesn't take your websites down. And that's wonderful. I mean, there's syslog and a few other things that can do this too. But syslog is a much lower level protocol, and it becomes a little bit difficult to debug at times. So this is a response to that. I've gone through my talk a little bit faster than I meant to. So yeah, I'm Rathan. That's the docs for the ZenIRCBot, my GitHub, my email, and my Twitter. Thank you. So I'm a little ahead, and I don't know if we want to just, if we're going to